order to be successful with your teaching, it should be planned well. According to the current constructivist learning theory, it's not enough to plan how to present the formal, discipline-based content of the course to your students. This would be called a content-focused approach to teaching. Instead, using a learning-focused approach to teaching ensures that you can support your students' learning. Planning a course or a teaching session requires paying attention to many things, including making the goals of the course visible. On this video, you will be introduced to a model that you can see here that presents the many components of the planning process. Planning of teaching at the university is a cyclical process. This means that you evaluate the learning and teaching processes and use this knowledge to plan your next teaching. The components of the planning processes are constantly alive, which means that you can change your plans or go back and forth at some points between the components if needed during the course. According to the constructivist learning theory, the components of the teaching learning processes should be aligned. Alignment means that the goals, contents, methods, tasks, and evaluation on the course are in line with each other. For example, if you tell your students that the aim is to gain deep overall understanding on the subject at your course, it's not in line if you do a test in the end of the course that measures detailed knowledge learned by heart. Now I want to warn you a bit. Watching this video and looking at this model and thinking all that you should do before your actual teaching may appear very demanding. Remember that these are ideals. If you are a beginning teacher, you can focus only to part of these things in the beginning. When you get more experienced, you will have more possibilities to pay attention to all of these components of the planning process. Whether you are experienced or a novice teacher, remember also to take care of your well-being. If you intend to develop your teaching, do it in the way you want and feel important. And do not do too many changes at once. Teaching never gets ready, you can always develop it further. Now, let's go to see the model.
The planning of a course or a teaching session should start with considering and explicitly detailing what the learning goals are. The teacher should make visible to both themselves and to the students what are both the domain competences and generic competences that should be learned during the course. It is a good idea to motivate your students by discussing with them why these learning goals are important for their development as an expert on their domain. Domain competences mean, for example, how a certain procedure is done in a laboratory and why it is done that way. For example, how different substitutes interact with each other. Generic competences mean skills that are general throughout disciplines, such as collaboration skills, language skills, and information-seeking skills. You can also help your students to see the links between different courses and thus be motivated to study this content. When you are planning teaching that is based on the learning-focused approach, one of the most important starting points for your teaching is to know your students. This does not mean that you should know them individually. Sometimes this is possible, but if you have a large group of students on a lecture, you cannot get to know them individually. In these cases, it is important to know some general information about them, such as who they are, for example, what year they are on, and are they main or minor students? What they generally want from this course. For example, do they tend to just want to pass this course, or are they usually interested in deeper learning on this course? How do the students on this course or domain generally learn? Are they generally deeply interested in understanding, or do they have a more superficial approach? By understanding your students, you can plan teaching that meets their needs and supports them in crucial parts. An essential factor in the planning of your course is the learning environment you can use to carry out your plans in action. For example, what kind of resources you can use in teaching, such as the learning materials, equipment, for example in practicals, demonstration materials, library resources, and so on. And what is most important, are these suitable for my students? Do these help my students to learn? Pay also attention to the time resource. How much time do you have for teaching and what is the best way to use it? In addition to the resources, the planning of the learning environments is crucial in today's teaching. Think carefully what kind of physical learning spaces you will use and what you could use. Will the teaching happen in a traditional lecture hall with the teacher standing in the front and students in rows? Or could you use other types of meeting rooms? Modern technical solutions offer many flexible possibilities that can support e-learning, which you can use in addition to your face-to-face meetings. Or maybe you could fully implement these technical solutions to some of your teaching. To conclude, thinking of various resources and learning environments is a question of how you as a teacher can offer the best possible environment for your students to develop their expertise on this field. When planning their teaching, new teachers are usually very interested in their own performance as a presenter. This is due to two things. Firstly, it has been studied that it is typical for new teachers to tend to focus on their performance. Secondly, our old conceptions of teaching consider the teacher as a presenter of content, not as a supporter of students' learning. When teachers get more experienced, they usually shift their focus to students. They get interested about how their students learn, who they actually are, and how the teacher could support their learning. The presenting skills are thus not in the center of becoming a university teacher. Instead, it is more important to analyze your own conceptions of teaching and learning, and by that way start to understand how you can support your students' learning. Of course, it is important to pay attention to presentation skills. For example, communicating with a clear voice and not standing in front of the material you are presenting. But these alone do not make your teaching good. Another thing that new teachers often ponder is the use of different teaching methods. We all would love it if someone would show us a teaching method that would make our students be motivated and learn excellently in all situations. Unfortunately, there is no such single method. It is very important that you pay attention to the methods that you and your colleagues are using and think about how suitable those are for your students. However, in the end, it all depends on you and your students how well these methods work. You need to select a teaching method that suits you and your students' learning goals the best way. It is wise to test different methods. This way you can find methods that are best in your case. Remember, teaching is a skill, which means that you can develop your teaching skills. An evident part of the success of a course is to make sure that the student's workload is in line with the amount of study credits and that the tasks they do during the course are in line with the learning goals. Workload and required tasks should be introduced in the curriculum, but the teacher of a course can do some focusing or modifications to the tasks during the course. For example, if it is mentioned in the curriculum that students are required to write a learning diary, the teacher can give extra instructions during the course about what kind of a diary they are expected to write. The course tasks include all tasks the students are supposed to perform or produce during the course. For example, do they need to participate on lectures and small group working? Are they supposed to discuss course contents in some web-based environments? And what kind of written materials they are supposed to produce or show during the course. It has been said that evaluation is the most powerful teaching method there is in higher education. No matter what the teacher sets as the learning goals of the course, or what the teacher tells is important to understand, the method of evaluation sets the direction for learning. If a student knows that learning is measured with an old-fashioned test at the end of the course, measuring knowledge learned by heart, this is what he or she studies for. Thus, it is very important to plan carefully what and how we are evaluating. The method of evaluation should be in line with the goals and implementation of the course. When evaluating the student's learning, you need to question yourself whether you want to measure the learning process or the end product, or both. According to the constructivist learning theory, the process of learning is actually more important than the end result of learning. The purpose of formative assessment is to provide the student feedback during the learning process about how the learning proceeds. Summative assessment is used to give information about how successfully the student has learned when teaching has been completed. Evaluation at the university is not limited only to student evaluation. To ensure the quality of learning, the teaching is also being evaluated. There are many levels in the evaluation of teaching, beginning from the individual teacher and ending in the whole learning environment the university offers for its students. Evaluation of teaching should not be understood as one teacher's personal evaluation, but more as an evaluation about how the teacher and the learning environment succeeded in motivating and supporting the students' learning. Students should not be asked, for example, was the teacher good, but instead how the teaching did or did not support the students' learning. Also, the students' own evaluation on their amount and quality of work should be asked. This directs the student to understand that their actions are central in their own learning. Feedback from students can be asked in many forms. Typical way is to ask it in the end of the course. But if asked during the course, it can be used to develop the current course in the way that students find beneficial. Students are usually asked to write about their views or rate some claims in a questionnaire to give feedback. A good way to collect feedback is also a group discussion between students. The group can then give feedback collectively directly to the teacher in a teaching situation. This can also take place in a web-based environment. When the feedback is used the best way possible, it can help both individual teachers to develop their teaching, but also guide the development of the whole teachers' community through the discussion of teachers. There are also general evaluation forms to help the department, faculty, or the university to develop teaching. These evaluation data can also be used by individual teachers, but its nature is a bit different than the evaluation which is collected on a specific course by the teacher. After the teaching learning situation has been evaluated, the planning of a new course begins on the basis of this evaluation information. Thus, the process is cyclical.